"Be my husband and I'll take care of your kids," said the billionaire lady. His response left her speechless. She was a billionaire with a surprising offer. "Be my husband, and I'll take care of your kids." She expected hesitation or negotiation, but his response was so unexpected, it left her completely speechless, questioning everything she thought she knew about him. He stood in the hospital hallway, clutching his daughter's medical bills with trembling hands, when the woman in the $1,000 suit made him an offer that sounded like salvation, or a gilded cage. "Marry me for 1 year," Victoria Sterling said, her diamond earrings catching the fluorescent light. "I need a husband to secure my inheritance. You need money for your children's care. It's just business." She slid a contract across the waiting room table, her manicured nail tapping a number with more zeros than he'd seen in his lifetime. But when he looked up from the paper, meeting her calculating gaze with eyes that had learned the hard way what it cost to compromise your soul, he said the 3 words she never expected to hear: "What's in it for them?" Before we go into details, click subscribe, like and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're watching from on comment section. I pray may the good God Almighty bless and preserve you all and your family. Amen. The city never truly slept, but Daniel Reed had long stopped noticing its rhythm. For him, mornings were a quiet war fought with the alarm clock, and nights were battles against the whisper of loneliness that crept through the thin walls of their small apartment. His 2 children, Emily and Noah, were his only reason to keep moving. At 36, Daniel had known success once. A promising architect with dreams taller than the skyline, he'd watched his life collapse in slow motion after the accident that took his wife, Laura. That night, wet roads, flashing sirens, the smell of gasoline, had turned every tomorrow into survival. Now, 3 years later, he worked double shifts at a construction company that once begged for his designs. His hands, once used to draw elegant structures, were calloused from hauling cement and bending rebar. Every bruise, every ache, was a promise to his children that they would never go hungry. Emily was 9, bright and observant, already learning to mother her younger brother. Noah, barely 6, had Laura's same dimpled smile. He still asked sometimes when Mommy would come back from heaven. Daniel would smile, hold him close, and whisper, "She's always watching over us." Then he'd hide in the bathroom and cry in silence. That Friday evening, the city glowed in gold and amber as Daniel hurried home with a small paper bag of discounted groceries. The elevator was broken again, so he climbed the stairs to the 5th floor, exhaustion dragging behind him. Inside their cramped apartment, Emily was helping Noah with homework. A faint melody from the old radio filled the air. When they saw him, their faces lit up like sunrise. "Daddy!" Noah jumped into his arms, nearly knocking the bag over. "I got us a treat," Daniel said with a tired smile, pulling out a small chocolate bar, split 3 ways, of course. Life was hard. But it was theirs. 2 worlds collide. The following Monday began like any other: grey skies, cold coffee, and a bus that smelled of damp clothes and impatience. Daniel stood near the back, holding the metal pole as the bus jolted forward. He didn't know that today would change everything. Downtown, at the corner of Lexington and 5th, a black limousine cut through the drizzle. Inside sat Victoria Lane, the woman whose name echoed in business columns and charity galas alike. Billionaire heiress, CEO of Lane Enterprises, and, according to gossip magazines, the most untouchable woman in the city. Victoria looked out the tinted window, her expression unreadable. On the seat beside her lay a single envelope, edges slightly crumpled. Inside was a letter, a confession, a plea, and a ghost from her past. She wasn't going to the office that day. She was chasing closure. Fate has a strange sense of timing. By noon, Daniel's construction crew had been assigned a new project, an expansion of the Lane Tower downtown. It was just another day of lifting, sweating, and ignoring the ache in his chest that whispered he was made for more than this. The site supervisor barked orders as rain began to fall again, slicking the metal scaffolds. Daniel was helping another worker secure a beam when a luxury car rolled to a stop at the curb. He barely glanced at it. People like that didn't notice people like him. But when the passenger door opened and Victoria Lane stepped out, something in the world seemed to pause. Even through the rain, her presence commanded attention, poise, power, and something colder beneath her perfect posture. She was there to inspect the site personally, a rare move that had everyone scrambling. Daniel just wiped his hands and kept working, until the scaffolding above him trembled. A loose beam, slick from the rain, slipped free. The shout came too late. Daniel looked up, and instinct took over. He pushed a younger worker out of the way as the beam crashed down, striking his shoulder and pinning his arm. Pain exploded through him like lightning. Victoria froze, horror flashing across her face as workers rushed to help. Within moments, paramedics arrived. Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness, his last memory a blur of blue lights and a woman's trembling voice saying, "Make sure he's okay." When destiny knocks, it doesn't always ask permission. Daniel woke up in a hospital bed. His shoulder was wrapped, his arm in a sling. The doctor said he'd need weeks, maybe months, of recovery. Weeks without work. Weeks without pay. Panic clawed at his chest. Rent. Groceries. School fees. How was he going to keep his kids fed? That evening, as he stared out the hospital window, the door opened quietly. A woman in a black coat entered, her heels clicking softly on the tile. It was her. Victoria Lane. Daniel blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. She was even more striking up close, calm eyes, but tired, as if the world had taken more from her than money could buy back. "I wanted to apologize," she said softly. "The accident happened at my site. I'm responsible for your medical bills, and for your lost wages." He tried to sit up. "That's not necessary. It wasn't your fault." "It was my project," she replied firmly. "And," she hesitated, as if weighing something, "I'd like to help your family. Personally." He frowned. "Help? How?" She took a slow breath. "I know this sounds unusual, but I'd like to make you an offer. One that could change everything for your children." Her gaze held his, steady and unreadable. "Be my husband," she said quietly, "and I'll take care of your kids." The words hung in the air, heavy, impossible. Daniel could only stare, heart hammering, as rain tapped against the window, like the city itself holding its breath. For a long moment, silence filled the sterile hospital room. The hum of machines, the steady drip of the four, and the distant chatter of nurses faded into nothing. All Daniel could hear was the echo of her words. "Be my husband." It sounded like something torn from a dream, or a cruel joke. He blinked, unsure how to respond. I think the medication's still in my system," he muttered, half laughing, half afraid of what she truly meant. But Victoria didn't flinch. She stood by his bedside with an unreadable calm, her gloved hands clasped before her. "I'm serious, Mr. Reed." Daniel stared at her. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she said, her voice steady, but softer than before. "You're a widower. You have 2 children. You're a man who puts others before himself. That's rare." His pulse quickened. How did she? "I had you looked into," she added quietly, as if reading his mind. "After the accident. I wanted to know who I hurt." "And what? You decided I'd make a good husband." The word felt heavy, absurd. She didn't smile. "I decided you might make a good partner for what I need." Her eyes flicked to the window, where raindrops drew silver lines down the glass. "You see, Mr. Reed, my life isn't as perfect as the papers make it seem. The board of Lane Enterprises has been pressuring me for months. Investors are pulling back because they think I'm unstable, too private, too unpredictable." Daniel frowned. "And what does that have to do with me?" "They want to see stability," she said. "A family. Someone by my side. Someone trustworthy." Her gaze softened then, and for the first time, he saw a crack in the mask. There was loneliness in her eyes, deep, aching loneliness. "I'm offering you a marriage in name only," she continued. "A contract, not love. You and your children will have everything you need. Home, education, security. In return, you'll stand by me in public, attend events, play the part of my husband. That's all." Daniel stared at her as the meaning sank in. It wasn't a proposal. It was a business deal. He let out a slow, bitter breath. "You think everything can be bought, don't you?" Her expression didn't change, but her voice dropped to a whisper. No. But sometimes, when the world won't give you a choice, you learn to pay for what you can't have freely. For a moment, they just looked at each other, two people from opposite worlds, both broken in ways they didn't dare admit. The weight of the decision. That night, after she left, Daniel couldn't sleep. Her words echoed through his head like a haunting refrain. Be my husband, and I'll take care of your kids. He turned on his side, wincing as his shoulder protested. The nurse had given him painkillers, but the ache wasn't just physical. He thought of Emily and Noah, how Emily's shoes had holes in them, how Noah's birthday was coming up and he didn't even have enough for a cake. Would this deal be wrong if it gave them a better life? He remembered Laura's voice, gentle, steady. Promise me you'll take care of them, Danny. No matter what. He had promised. And he'd kept that promise, even when the world tried to break him. But this wasn't taking care of them. It felt like selling himself. Still, part of him wondered, maybe this was fate's strange way of giving him a chance to start over. An unlikely visitor. The next morning, he woke to a knock on the hospital door. Mr. Reed. A soft voice called. A woman in her early 60s entered, poised, elegant, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. She carried a small basket of fruit and a sealed envelope. Miss Lane asked me to deliver this, she said. Daniel sat up slowly. You work for her. I've been her assistant for 20 years, the woman said with a faint smile. She's not an easy person to understand, but she means well. In her own way. When the woman left, Daniel opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, typed, formal, but strangely personal. Mr. Reed. I don't expect you to answer now. Think about what your children need, not what your pride can endure. If you accept, a car will be waiting outside the hospital at 10 a.m. on Friday. It will take you and your children to my home, where we can discuss details. If you decline, I will still honor your medical and living expenses until you recover. You owe me nothing either way. Victoria Lane. Daniel read the letter 3 times. He folded it carefully and stared at the ceiling. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Emily's eyes. 2 days later, he was home. The apartment felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in. Emily helped him adjust his sling while Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, building towers out of cereal boxes. Daddy, Emily asked softly, are we going to be okay? The doctor said you can't work for a while. He swallowed hard, forcing a smile. We'll be fine, sweetheart. Daddy always figures it out. But she was too smart for her age. She knew fine meant barely. That night, when the kids were asleep, Daniel sat at the small kitchen table, the letter open before him. He stared at it until the words blurred. Maybe this was the miracle he'd stopped believing in. Or maybe it was a trap. But when he imagined Emily going to bed hungry again, when he thought about Noah asking for new crayons he couldn't afford, his heart broke all over again. Friday morning. The morning sun spilled through the cracked blinds. Daniel stood by the window, freshly shaven for the first time in weeks, wearing the one good shirt he owned. His sling was neat, his heart anything but. Outside, a black car waited at the curb. Emily and Noah clutched their small backpacks, looking up at him with sleepy curiosity. Where are we going, Daddy? Noah asked. He hesitated, then smiled faintly. To meet someone who might help us. As he locked the door, he took one last look at the apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the creaky fan, the memories of Laura that lingered in every corner. Wish me luck, honey, he whispered under his breath. Then he turned, took his children's hands, and stepped into a future he didn't understand. The mansion on the hill. The car wound through the city until skyscrapers gave way to rolling hills. Then, at the end of a private drive, the mansion came into view, stone, glass, and quiet grandeur. Emily gasped softly. Daddy, is this a castle? Daniel smiled faintly. Something like that. When they stepped out, a line of uniformed staff greeted them. At the top of the marble stairs stood Victoria Lane, impeccably dressed, poised, and yet strangely uncertain. For a moment, their eyes met. Hers softened, just slightly, when she saw the children. Mr. Reed, she said, her tone formal. Welcome. He nodded stiffly. Miss Lane. Then Emily stepped forward shyly and said, "Thank you for helping my daddy." Something flickered across Victoria's face, surprise, then something warmer. She knelt, meeting the child's eyes. "You must be Emily," she said softly. "And you must be Noah." Noah grinned, clutching his toy car. "Do you have a big yard?" For the first time, Victoria smiled. The biggest. As they entered the mansion, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something he couldn't control, something that would test not just his pride, but his heart. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Victoria's last glance before they disappeared inside told him she felt it too. The foyer of Victoria Lane's mansion was the kind of place Daniel had only seen in magazines. Vaulted ceilings, a staircase that curved like a question mark, and light that poured through floor-to-ceiling windows. Yet beneath the polished perfection, he felt a chill. It wasn't coldness exactly. It was silence, an emptiness so profound it hummed. A house this large shouldn't feel lonely, he thought. "Please, come in," Victoria said. Her voice echoed softly off marble and glass. Emily clung to his good arm, her eyes wide. Noah was already peeking behind columns, whispering wow every few seconds. A woman in a black suit approached with quiet grace. "Mr. Reed, Miss Lane, your meeting room is ready." Victoria nodded and led the way. Daniel followed, half lost between awe and suspicion. Terms and conditions. The meeting room was lined with books and smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. On the table lay a leather folder, thick with documents. A lawyer, stooped, silver-haired, rose to greet Daniel. "Mr. Reed," the lawyer said kindly, "Miss Lane has drawn up a preliminary agreement. Nothing binding yet, just the framework of the arrangement you discussed." Victoria gestured for him to sit. "I want everything to be transparent." Daniel sank into the chair, feeling like a man who had stumbled into a boardroom while still wearing a construction worker's soul. The lawyer opened the folder. "The proposal," he began, "states that Mr. Reed and Miss Lane will enter a legally recognized marriage for a term of 1 year. During that time, Miss Lane will provide financial support for Mr. Reed's children, educational expenses, medical coverage, and housing. In exchange, Mr. Reed agrees to fulfill the role of husband in public appearances and family events." Daniel's head spun. It was all there in black and white, his life, itemized and priced. He cleared his throat. "And after a year?" "Either party may choose to dissolve the arrangement," the lawyer said. "No penalties. Both sides walk away." Victoria's gaze was steady. "This isn't a cage, Mr. Reed. You're free to leave if it becomes unbearable." He studied her face. There was no arrogance there now, only exhaustion, maybe even a trace of fear. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "You could hire an actor. Someone polished. Not me." Her eyes flickered. "Because you're real," she said simply. "Because when I saw you push that man out of the way, you didn't think about yourself. You just acted. I haven't met someone like that in years." For a moment, neither spoke. Finally Daniel said, "I'll need time to read it." "Of course." She rose. "Stay as long as you need. The children can explore the gardens." When she left, the room seemed to exhale with her. Echoes of the past. Daniel didn't read the contract right away. Instead, he wandered through the quiet house, his children's laughter echoing faintly from the courtyard. Everywhere he looked were reminders of a life lived in control. Portraits, awards, order. But no photos of family. No trace of warmth. He found Victoria on the terrace, staring out over the manicured lawn. The wind played with a loose strand of her hair. "Beautiful place," he said. She turned slightly. "It was my father's. I grew up here." "Must have been nice." A sad smile. "Nice is one word for it." She paused. "My parents loved appearances more than affection. My mother left when I was 10. My father taught me that money could fill any silence. He was wrong." There it was again, that glimmer of vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. Daniel leaned against the railing. "You know, my wife used to say love doesn't need fixing, it needs faith." Victoria looked at him, curious. "Did she make you believe that?" He smiled faintly. "She tried. Some days I still do." Silence settled between them, gentle, not awkward. For the first time, she didn't look like a billionaire talking to a stranger. She looked like a woman remembering what it meant to be human. Night thoughts. That evening, the children were given a guest room that looked like something from a fairy tale. Emily fell asleep surrounded by stuffed animals she hadn't even asked for. Noah lay beside her, clutching his toy car. Daniel stood by the window, staring at the city lights far below. The contract sat on the desk, its pages whispering temptations he didn't want to name. It wasn't just about money anymore. There was something about Victoria, her solitude, her strange honesty, that tugged at something he'd buried. But could he really live a lie, even for survival? He thought of Laura again, her laugh, her warmth, her faith in him. Would she understand? A soft knock broke the silence. Victoria stood at the door, barefoot, a glass of water in her hand. Can't sleep. He shook his head. Too many thoughts. She stepped closer, hesitating. You don't have to decide tonight. I know. He looked at her then, really looked. The woman who could buy anything, yet stood there offering the one thing she couldn't own, trust. Why are you doing this, Victoria? He asked. Really? She met his eyes, and this time there was no mask, no pretense. Because I'm tired of pretending I don't need anyone. The words hit him harder than he expected. For a long moment, they stood in silence, two souls orbiting pain and hope in equal measure. Then she whispered, "Good night, Daniel," and walked away. He watched her go, the echo of her confession lingering like perfume in the air. The answer. The next morning, Daniel woke early. Sunlight streamed across the room, and in that golden quiet, he knew what he had to do. When Victoria came down to breakfast, he was waiting, dressed neatly, the contract folder in hand. I read it, he said. And? She asked. He took a breath. I'll do it. Her composure faltered for the first time. You're sure? He nodded. But only on one condition. Her brows rose. Name it. No lies. Not about the kids, not about us. If we're going to pretend, we at least owe each other honesty behind closed doors. For a moment, Victoria simply looked at him. Then she smiled, a real, fragile smile. Deal. She extended her hand. He hesitated, then took it. Her skin was warm, her grip firm. In that handshake, something wordless passed between them. Not love. Not yet. But something dangerous enough to become it. 3 days later, the mansion buzzed with a strange, subdued energy. For once, the quiet halls held footsteps that weren't just servants going about their routines. Florists came and went. A pair of photographers arranged their lenses in the courtyard. Yet there would be no guests, no orchestra, no lavish spectacle. Just a lawyer, 2 witnesses, and a promise written in ink. Victoria had insisted on keeping it private. It's not for show, she'd said. Not yet. Daniel stood before a mirror in a guest room, adjusting the cuffs of the dark suit that had been tailored for him the night before. It fit almost too well, as though the fabric had memorized his unease. His reflection stared back, clean-shaven, hair trimmed, a man who looked respectable enough to stand beside a billionaire. But under the neat exterior beat the same heart that still missed the sound of his wife's laughter. Emily and Noah burst into the room, excitement lighting their faces. Daddy, you look like a prince. Emily squealed. Noah giggled. Can I wear a tie too? He knelt carefully, his healing shoulder still tender. Maybe when you're a little older, champ. He kissed them both on the forehead, trying to absorb their joy, because inside, he felt none. A ceremony without music. The ceremony took place in the library, sunlight spilling through stained glass windows that painted the shelves in soft colors. A judge sat at the head of a long table, papers laid neatly before him. Victoria entered a moment later in a cream-colored dress that wasn't quite a wedding gown. Simple, elegant, untouched by romance. For a heartbeat, Daniel forgot how to breathe. She wasn't dazzling in the way he'd imagined a billionaire would be. She was human, almost fragile. Her eyes met his, uncertain, as if asking silently, "Are we really doing this?" He nodded once, the smallest reassurance. The judge cleared his throat. We are gathered here today to witness the union of Victoria Lane and Daniel Reed. The words washed over him like background noise. He heard his own voice respond when prompted, heard hers echo softly in reply. Rings, thin, understated bands, slid onto fingers that didn't tremble, though both hearts did. When the judge finally said, "You may seal your vows," Victoria hesitated. Then she leaned forward and brushed her lips lightly against Daniel's cheek. The touch was brief, formal, but it sent a shiver through both of them, a spark of something they weren't ready to name. Applause came from the two witnesses and the lawyer. Emily clapped too, unaware of the strange gravity of what had just happened. Victoria smiled at the children. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Reed," the judge said, signing the final page. Paper, ink, and silence. Just like that, their fates intertwined. A home divided. By evening, the mansion had quieted again. The staff withdrew, the florists vanished, and only the faint scent of lilies lingered. Daniel found himself in a spacious suite down the hall from Victoria's. He didn't know what to do with the silence. It felt heavier now, wrapped around him like an unspoken vow. A knock came at the door. Victoria stood there holding 2 glasses of champagne. "I thought we should toast," she said, almost shyly. "To our arrangement." He accepted the glass. "To survival," he said, raising it. She smiled faintly. "To second chances." They drank in silence. "Your children are asleep," she said after a moment. "They love the garden." Noah tried to feed the koi with his cereal. He chuckled softly. "That sounds like him." Then the laughter faded. "You've given them more in a day than I could in a year," he said quietly. "Thank you." She looked down, her thumb tracing the rim of her glass. "You don't have to thank me. I'm getting something out of this too." He tilted his head. "Which is?" Her eyes met his, steady. "A chance to pretend I'm not alone." The following week was a whirlwind of appearances. The world moved fast in Victoria Lane's orbit. Meetings, charity events, interviews. Suddenly Daniel was no longer invisible. Cameras followed him. People whispered his name with curiosity. Who is this man who married the most powerful woman in the city? He stood beside her in polished suits, answering polite questions, smiling on cue. Each time she slipped her hand through his arm, the crowd saw the perfect picture, the devoted husband, the gracious wife. But in private, they kept their distance. At night, he'd tuck the children into bed and linger by the window of his room, watching the city pulse below. Sometimes he heard her pacing the hall, restless, sleepless. One evening, after a particularly tense charity gala, they returned home in silence. Cameras had caught Victoria looking stiff, emotionless beside her new husband. Online commentators were already speculating about trouble in paradise. When the car doors closed behind them, Daniel finally said, "You don't have to keep proving something to them. You don't owe anyone your happiness." She turned toward him, eyes flashing, not in anger, but something sharper. "You think I do this for them?" He shrugged. "I think you're still trying to prove something to your father." That hit harder than he expected. She froze, breath catching. "Don't talk about him." "I'm sorry," he said softly, "but you can't spend your life fighting ghosts." Her jaw trembled, just slightly, before she looked away. "Good night, Mr. Reed." The Mr. cut deeper than it should have. Weeks passed. The children settled easily. Private tutors, wide lawns, laughter-filling rooms that hadn't known joy for years. But between Daniel and Victoria, a quiet tension grew. He saw it in the way she lingered at breakfast but never Saturday. In how she stood at the edge of the children's playroom, watching from afar, wanting to join but not knowing how. One afternoon, Emily ran to her. "Miss Victoria, can you help me braid my hair?" Victoria blinked, startled. I'm not sure I remember how." Emily grinned. "I can teach you." Daniel watched from the doorway as Emily stood on a stool, explaining step by step while Victoria followed with clumsy fingers and an embarrassed laugh. It was the first time he'd ever heard her laugh, really laugh. Later, as he tucked Emily in, she whispered, "Daddy, she's nice. Just sad." He kissed her forehead. "Yeah, sweetheart. She is." And for the first time, he wondered if his heart was starting to care about the sadness in Victoria Lane's eyes. The past comes knocking. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled across the sky, Daniel found Victoria in her study. The glow of her laptop cast pale light over her face. "You should take a break," he said gently. "You've been at it all day." "I can't." Her tone was clipped. "There's a rumor about the marriage. They're saying I paid you to save my company's reputation." He smiled faintly. "Well, technically." She shot him a glare. He raised his hands. "Kidding." Then softer. "Let them talk. People always need a story." She looked up, eyes weary. "You don't understand. They'll destroy everything my father built if they think I'm weak." He stepped closer, voice steady. "Then maybe it's time to stop trying to live for what he built and start living for yourself." She stared at him, lips parting as if to argue, but the words never came. Instead, something else filled the space between them, a fragile, dangerous quiet. For the first time, she didn't look away. Outside, lightning flashed. The thunder came a second later, loud enough to shake the windows, but neither of them moved. Victoria said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "And perfect is what got me here. Perfect smiles, perfect answers, perfect lies." She turned toward the window, her silhouette sharp against the city lights. "I need someone who doesn't know how to pretend. Someone real." Reed let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of her words settle between them. He'd spent years keeping his head down, avoiding exactly this kind of complication. But there was something in her voice, a vulnerability she was trying to hide, that cut through his instincts to run. "How long?" he asked. 6 months. Maybe less if we are convincing enough." "And after?" Victoria turned back to face him. "After, you go back to your life. Wealthier, certainly. Free of me, definitely." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "I promise not to haunt you." Reed walked to the window beside her, looking out at the glittering city below. Somewhere down there was his cramped apartment, his simple life, his safety. Up here was chaos, risk, and a woman who seemed as trapped as he'd ever been, just in a different kind of cage. "One condition," he said finally. "Name it." "No more lies between us. I'll play the part for everyone else, but when it's just us, I want the truth." Victoria extended her hand. "Deal." As their hands met, Reed wondered if he'd just made the best decision of his life, or the worst. Only time would tell if Victoria Pierce's carefully constructed plan would save them both, or destroy what little stability either of them had left. "Because an actor would make it look perfect," Victoria said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "And perfect is what got me here. Perfect smiles, perfect answers, perfect lies." She turned toward the window, her silhouette sharp against the city lights. "I need someone who doesn't know how to pretend. Someone real." Reed let out a slow breath. "Real doesn't photograph well. It photographs honest. And right now, honest is the only currency I have left." He walked to the window beside her. The city sprawled below, indifferent to their negotiation. 6 months. 6 months. Then you're free. Wealthier. And I'll have bought enough time to salvage what's left of Pierce Industries. Reed studied her reflection in the glass. "One condition." "Name it." "When it's just us, no cameras, no audience, we tell the truth. I won't lie to the world and to you." Victoria's shoulders relaxed slightly. She turned, extending her hand. "Deal." Their handshake was firm, brief, professional. But Reed caught something in her eyes, gratitude, maybe, or relief. "So," he said, stepping back, "when do we start this performance?" "Tomorrow. Charity gala. Black tie." She moved toward her desk, all business again. "My stylist will come to you at 4. Reed nodded slowly, then headed for the door. He paused at the threshold. "Victoria." She looked up. "We are both going to regret this, aren't we?" For the first time, she smiled, a real one, sad and knowing. "Probably," she said. "But at least we'll regret it honestly." Reed left, the door clicking softly behind him. Victoria remained at her desk, staring at the contract that would bind them together. Outside, the city continued its indifferent hum. Two people had just agreed to a beautiful lie built on a foundation of truth. Thanks for taking your precious time watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more beautiful stories.